You're talking to your dog. Maybe you're asking them a question. Maybe you're using that specific tone you reserve for them, the one that's slightly higher and overly enthusiastic. And mid-sentence, your dog tilts their head, one ear up, one ear sideways, eyes locked on yours, head cocked at a 45-degree angle. It's one of the most universally endearing things dogs do. Everyone melts, everyone smiles, everyone pulls out their phone to capture it. But almost nobody asks the question that researchers have been investigating for years. Why do dogs do that? Is it just cute? Is it communication? Is it processing? Or is something neurological happening that we've been interpreting as charm? Scientists studying canine auditory processing, facial recognition, and cognitive function have found that the head tilt isn't random. It's not a trick. It's not performance. It's a behavior tied to how dogs process sound, interpret language, and attempt to extract meaning from the incomprehensible stream of noise that comes out of your mouth every single day. And once you understand what's happening in their brain during that tilt, you realize your dog isn't just being cute. They're working. Let's start with the most commonly proposed explanation: auditory processing. Dogs hear better than humans. That's established. But better doesn't just mean more sensitive. It also means more directional. A dog's ear structure allows them to localize sound sources with incredible precision. They can detect where a sound is coming from within a few degrees of accuracy. But human speech presents a unique challenge. When you talk, the sound is coming from your mouth, but your face is a complex three-dimensional structure that reflects and absorbs sound waves. For a dog looking straight at you, the acoustic signal is slightly muddled. By tilting their head, they're changing the angle at which sound waves enter their ears. That adjustment helps them localize the source more precisely and potentially filter out interference. Think of it like adjusting an old TV antenna. A small change in angle can sharpen the signal. That's hypothesis 1. The dog tilts their head to hear you better. But there's a second explanation, and this one is more visually oriented. Dogs have snouts. Depending on the breed, that snout can be long, short, or somewhere in between. And that snout creates a visual obstruction. When a dog looks straight at you, their muzzle blocks part of their view of your mouth. A 2021 study tested this by analyzing head tilting frequency across breeds. The finding: breeds with longer snouts tilted their heads more often than brachycephalic breeds. Dogs with short, flat faces like pugs or bulldogs. The interpretation: dogs tilt their heads to see around their muzzle and get a clearer view of your face, specifically your mouth, because your mouth is where the sound is coming from, and dogs are highly attuned to visual cues. They're not just listening to what you're saying, they're watching how you're saying it. Facial expressions, lip movements, the synchrony between sound and movement. The head tilt might be a compensation mechanism that allows them to integrate auditory and visual information more effectively. But here's where it gets really interesting. Not all dogs tilt their heads equally. Some dogs do it constantly, others almost never. And the frequency seems to correlate with something unexpected: vocabulary size. A study conducted at ETV's Lorand University in Budapest identified a small subset of dogs. They called them gifted word learners, who could learn the names of dozens, sometimes hundreds, of objects. These dogs, when tested, tilted their heads significantly more often than average dogs when hearing object names. The researchers hype that the head tilt might be associated with increased attention and cognitive effort. The dog is trying to extract meaning from a sound. They're not just hearing words. They're attempting to decode them. The tilt might be the visible marker of a brain working harder to process language-like information. So for some dogs, especially those who've been trained to associate specific words with specific objects or actions, the head tilt might not be about hearing better or seeing better. It might be about thinking harder. There's also an emotional and social dimension that almost nobody considers. Dogs are extraordinarily good at reading human behavior. They've evolved to be sensitive to our emotional states, our body language, our facial expressions. And one thing dogs learn very quickly is what behaviors get positive responses from humans. When a dog tilts their head and you smile, laugh, talk in a higher pitch, reach out to pet them, you've just reinforced that behavior. The dog learns head tilt equals positive attention. Over time, some dogs start tilting their heads more frequently, not because they're confused or processing something, but because they've learned it's a social strategy. They're using the behavior to engage you. That's not manipulation. That's social learning. And it's evidence of how deeply dogs have adapted to living with humans. They don't just respond to us. They learn how to elicit specific responses from us. But let's go back to the cognitive explanation, because this is the one that's most scientifically supported. When you talk to your dog, especially if you're asking a question or using an interrogative tone. Your pitch rises at the end. Dogs are sensitive to pitch variation. They use it to distinguish between different types of vocalizations. A rising pitch often signals uncertainty or a question. And for a dog trying to predict what happens next, that tonal shift is important information. The head tilt might be the behavioral output of the dog's brain switching into prediction mode. You just said something that sounded like a question. The dog doesn't understand the words, but they recognize the pattern, and now their brain is trying to figure out what you're asking for. Should they sit? Come. Get its way. The tilt is the visible sign of cognitive effort. They're thinking. There's also a neurological angle worth mentioning. Some researchers have speculated that the head tilt might be related to how dogs process cross-modal information from multiple senses simultaneously. When you talk, your dog is hearing your voice and seeing your face. Those two streams of information have to be integrated in the brain. The head tilt might facilitate that integration by optimizing both auditory and visual input at the same time. It's a postural adjustment that allows the brain to process two sensory channels more efficiently. That's speculative, but it fits with what we know about how the brain handles multisensory processing. Now let's talk about what it means when the head tilt is absent. Some dogs never tilt their heads. Does that mean they're less intelligent? Less engaged? Not necessarily. Head tilting frequency seems to vary by individual temperament, breed, and learning history. Some dogs are more visually oriented. Others are more A dog that rarely tilts their head might simply be processing information differently. They're relying more on smell or body language, and less on auditory visual integration. Absence of the tilt doesn't mean absence of attention. It just means the dog's brain is using a different processing strategy. But there is one context where the sudden appearance of a head tilt is medically significant. Vestibular disease. If your dog suddenly starts tilting their head to one side and can't straighten it, that's not the cute head tilt. That's a medical emergency. Vestibular dysfunction affects balance and spatial orientation. The dog might also stumble, circle, have abnormal eye movements, or vomit. It can be caused by inner ear infections, neurological issues, or idiopathic vestibular syndrome, which is essentially a stroke-like event affecting the balance system. If your dog's head is stuck tilted and they seem disoriented, get to a vet immediately. That's not behavior. That's neurology. But for the typical, transient, adorable head tilt that happens during conversation, here's what's most likely happening. Your dog is adjusting their sensory input, auditory, visual, or both, to better process what you're communicating. They might be trying to hear you more clearly. They might be trying to see your face around their muzzle. They might be cognitively engaged, attempting to extract meaning from the sound patterns you're producing. And they might have learned, through repeated interaction, that tilting their head gets your attention. Your smile, your voice, all of which are rewarding. All of those explanations can be true at the same time. The head tilt is multifunctional. It's sensory optimization. It's cognitive effort. It's social communication. And yes, it's also incredibly cute. But the cuteness isn't the point. The point is that your dog is doing something cognitively complex. They're trying to understand you. They're using every tool they have. Auditory processing, visual attention, learned behavior, prediction, to decode the stream of sound coming out of your mouth. And the head tilt is the visible evidence of that effort. So the next time your dog tilts their head at you, don't just smile and move on. Recognize what you're seeing. That's a brain working. That's a dog trying to bridge the communication gap between two species that don't share a language. That's 15,000 years of evolution producing a behavior. That makes cross-species interaction just a little bit easier. Your dog doesn't understand your words, but they're trying. And that tilt is the proof. If this changed how you see the head tilt, subscribe and drop a comment. Does your dog tilt their head more when you use certain words or tones? And if you've ever wondered why your dog gets aggressive seemingly out of nowhere, that's the last video. And the neuroscience of fear versus dominance will show you it's almost never what people think.